I was monitoring the flight ops screens when my phone buzzed with a fraud alert. $7,250. 5 tickets to a destination I wasn't invited to. My mother had just told me flights were $1,450 each, warning me to stay behind if I could not afford it. Staring at the transaction on my own credit card, I realized she did not just leave me out. She was teaching me a lesson with my own money. My name is Ariana Chapman, and I live my life in Zulu time. It was 0200 hours. The operations control center was freezing, a deliberate choice to keep the night shift from drifting off. Around me, the hum of 24-hour news cycles and the rhythmic clacking of keyboards created a soundscape I usually found comforting. I was staring at the main board, tracking a red-eye from Los Angeles that was fighting a nasty headwind over the Rockies. My job was risk management. I anticipated turbulence before the pilots even felt the shudder. I rerouted paths before fuel became an issue. I was the person who fixed things before they broke. But I missed the turbulence heading for my own bank account. My phone was sitting face down on the laminate desk, vibrating against the hard surface. It was not the short, staccato buzz of a text message. It was a long, insistent vibration, a notification, then another, then a third. I flipped it over. The screen was bright in the dim room, and the Chase Fraud Alert banner was waiting for me. Did you attempt a charge of $7,250 at Global Sky Travel? Reply yes or no. I blinked. My eyes were dry from the recycled air. So I blinked again, assuming I had misread the decimal point. $700? No, the comma was distinct. $7,250. My heart did not race. It stopped. It was that peculiar, cold sensation of a sudden drop in cabin pressure. I unlocked my phone, ignoring the text prompt, and logged straight into the banking app. My fingers flew across the screen, muscle memory guiding me despite the sudden tremor in my hands. Pending transactions. There it was, a massive, bloating leech attached to my checking account. I tapped for details. The merchant was a high-end travel portal. The breakdown was itemized in the notes section, a feature of the travel rewards card I had spent 5 years building up. Passenger 1, Daphne Chapman. My mother. Passenger 2, Gordon Chapman. My father. Passenger 3, Caleb Chapman. My brother. Passenger 4, Tessa Chapman. My sister-in-law. Passenger 5, Sloan Miller. I did not know a Sloan Miller. I sat there, the blue light of the monitors reflecting off my glasses, and read the list again. 5 tickets, international business class, departing in 3 weeks. My name was not on the list. It was not an error. It was an erasure. The air in the control center seemed to vanish. I was suddenly back at the dinner table last Sunday. The smell of my mother's roast chicken, which always ran a little dry, filled my memory. I remembered the way she had wiped her mouth with a napkin. Looking at me with that pitying, condescending tilt of her head she reserved specifically for her eldest daughter. Flights are $1,450 each. She had said, her voice smooth and reasonable. If you cannot afford it, Ariana, just stay behind. We understand. You have your limitations. I had sat there, humiliated, clutching my water glass. I had told them work was busy. I had told them I needed to save for a down payment. I had swallowed the rejection because I thought that was the end of it. They were going on a family vacation without me. It hurt. But I was 32 years old. I could handle exclusion. I could not handle this. They had told me I could not afford to go. And then they had charged the entire trip to my card. I looked at the transaction timestamp. 3 minutes ago, they were probably sitting around Caleb's living room right now. Toasts being made, excitement bubbling over about the Italian coast or wherever they were headed. They were celebrating a trip financed by the daughter they had left behind. I stood up. My chair rolled back with a harsh scrape against the floor. A colleague 2 desks over, a guy named Marcus, looked up from his weather charts. "You okay?" "Ari?" he asked. I did not look at him. I could not look at him. If I made eye contact, the professional mask I had welded to my face would crack, and I would start screaming, Fine, I said. My voice sounded robotic, just a discrepancy. I walked out of the main floor and into the break room. It was empty, smelling of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I hit the speed dial for the bank. Please wait for the next available agent. The automated voice said. I did not wait. I punched in the code for the fraud department. The priority line I knew from my own travels. Agent speaking. How can I help you? I am looking at a pending charge of $7,250. I said. My voice was frighteningly calm. I did not make this charge. We can put a stop on that immediately. Ms. Chapman, do you have the card in your possession? I do. Has anyone else had access to your card? A family member? A spouse? The question hung in the air. This was the moment. If I said yes. If I said, well. My brother might have the number. It became a civil dispute. The bank would wash their hands of it. They would tell me to work it out at the dinner table. No. I said, I am the only authorized user. This is theft. I want to be clear. The agent said, her tone shifting to something sharper, more legalistic. You are declaring this as unauthorized criminal activity. This will trigger an investigation. If these individuals are known to you, prosecution is a possibility. I stared at the vending machine in the corner, watching the coil holding a bag of chips. Mark it as fraud. I said, lock the card, kill the transaction. Done. The card is dead. We are issuing a provisional credit while we investigate. You will get a new card in 3 to 5 business days. I hung up. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like hypothermia. Then, my phone buzzed again, a text message. It was Caleb. Hey sis, weird glitch just happened. We were booking the flights and the confirmation didn't go through. It says payment declined. Can you call the bank real quick? We're trying to lock in these seats before the price jumps. I stared at the words. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement. He did not even pretend to ask. He did not ask if he could borrow the money. He did not ask if I was okay with dropping over $7,000 on a Tuesday night. He just assumed. He assumed I was the safety net. He assumed I was the infinite resource. He assumed that even if I was not invited, I would be honored to pay for the privilege of their happiness. He thought I was a doormat. He thought I was an ATM with a pulse. I typed back. I did not use capital letters. I did not use emojis. I did not scream. Like you said. I stayed behind. I hit send. Then I blocked his number. I blocked my mother. I blocked my father. I blocked Tessa. I walked back out to the operations floor. But I did not sit down. I grabbed a notepad and a pen. I needed to think like a dispatcher. I needed to secure the perimeter. If they had booked this online, they did not just physically steal a card from my purse. I had my purse. That meant they had data. I pulled up my email on the work terminal. I went to the settings. I changed the password to a string of random alphanumerics, 16 characters long. I went to my primary banking portal, changed the password. Enabled two-factor authentication to an authenticator app. Not my phone number. Just in case they tried to SIM swap me. I went to my retirement account, changed it. I went to the travel rewards portal where the booking originated, and that was when I saw it. The login history. Successful login. Device. Caleb's iPhone 15 Pro. Time. 01:45 hours. They did not just use my card number. They had logged into my account. They had impersonated me. They had used my points history, my status, my identity to book a trip for themselves. The confirmation email for the booking had been archived immediately. I went to my trash folder. There it was. A rule had been set up in my email settings. If email contains global sky travel, mark as read and move to trash. They had planned this. This was not an impulse buy. This was not Caleb getting drunk and stealing a card number he found on the counter. This was a coordinated extraction of resources. They had anticipated the notification emails and set up a rule to hide them. They had logged in using my credentials. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. The total at the bottom of the trashed invoice caught my eye. It was not just the $7,250 for the flights. There were add-ons, prepaid luxury concierge fee, $1,200. Airport private transfer. $450. Travel insurance. $640. Total charged. $9,540. I looked at the number. Nearly $10,000. That was my emergency fund. That was the car repair fund. That was my life savings for the year. They had wiped me out in less than an hour. I looked at the screen, at the little deleted icon next to the email. They thought they were smart. They thought they had covered their tracks by deleting an email, but they forgot who they were dealing with. I tracked things that moved at 500 miles per hour. I found patterns in chaos. I printed the email. I printed the login history showing Caleb's device. I printed the rule they had created in my settings. I folded the papers and put them in my bag. My phone screen lit up one more time. A voicemail notification from a number I did not recognize, probably the Sloan person or a friend's phone they were borrowing since I had blocked the family. I did not listen to it. I sat back down at my desk. The flight from Los Angeles was starting its descent. The pilot was requesting a gate assignment. I spoke into my headset, my voice steady, clear, and absolutely devoid of warmth. Flight 402. You are cleared for approach. Runway 27 left. I was done being the passenger in my own life. I was taking control of the plane, and the turbulence was just beginning. I sat in the quiet hum of the break room, watching the steam rise from a cup of black coffee I had no intention of drinking. The adrenaline spike from the fraud alert was receding, leaving behind a cold, heavy clarity. It was a familiar feeling. This weight. It was the specific gravity of being the reliable one. In every family, there is usually one person designated as the safety net. I had been drafted into that role before I could even legally drive. I was the child who filled out her own permission slips. I was the one who remembered to buy milk when the carton was light. I was the one who learned that if I wanted something, I had to earn the money, hide it in a shoebox, and never speak of it, or else it would be absorbed into the collective need of the house. Caleb was different. Caleb was the sun around which our family orbit grew distorted. He was 30 years old, 2 years younger than me, but he had mastered the art of being perpetually just a little bit short. It was never his fault. It was the economy. It was a tyrannical boss. It was bad luck. It was always just $500 for rent, or $200 for a new tire, or $50 because he had left his wallet at a bar. I closed my eyes and saw the ledger in my head. It was a mental spreadsheet I had tried to ignore for a decade. There was the time he needed first and last month's rent for that apartment in the city. The one with the exposed brick he insisted was vital for his mental health. $2,400. He promised to pay me back when his tax return came in. When April arrived, the tax return went to a music festival ticket. There was the time Mom called me, whispering, saying Caleb was in a bind with a credit card company and it was going to ruin his credit score. She asked me to help him out. Just this once. $1,100. I paid it. I never saw a dime back. I had been buying my way into their good graces for years. I thought that if I solved the problem, I secured my place. I thought my utility was the same thing as love. But looking at the printout of the flight confirmation, the brutal truth settled in my gut like lead. They did not love me for who I was. They loved me for what I could provide. To them, I was not Ariana, the daughter and sister. I was a sentient overdraft protection plan. My mother, Daphne, was the architect of this dynamic. She had a terrifying talent for weaponizing concern. She never asked for money directly. She would sigh. She would talk about how hard things were, how tired she was, how Caleb was struggling so much and it was breaking her heart. She would create a vacuum of anxiety, and I would rush in to fill it with cash just to make the noise stop. She called it being a good family. I realize now it was just a subscription service she had never canceled. And my father, Gordon, the peacekeeper, the man who sat in his armchair and watched the robbery happen, nodding along because it was easier than confronting his wife. His favorite phrase was, "Let us just move past this." He used it like a gavel to silence any objection I ever raised. If I complained that Caleb had stolen my laptop to pawn it, which happened when I was 22, Dad would say, "Let us just move past this. He is going through a hard time." He was not a neutral party. He was the getaway driver. The sting of the ticket price, $9,540, was not just about the theft. It was the specific cruelty of the exclusion. If you cannot afford it, stay behind. That sentence replayed in my mind, stripping away the varnish of our family history. It was not a suggestion, it was a demarcation line. They were the people who deserved to experience life. I was the person who funded it. They were the protagonists. I was the producer who stayed in the office handling the budget while they walked the red carpet. By telling me to stay behind, they had finally said the quiet part out loud. I was not part of the inner circle. I was staff. And yet, they felt entitled to use my card. They felt entitled to my credit score, my savings, my hard work. They believed so thoroughly in my role as the financier that they did not even think they needed my permission anymore. They just took it, like harvesting a crop they had planted. I looked down at my hands. They were perfectly still. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing sense of betrayal that usually sent me crying into my pillow, wondering why I was not enough for them. But the tears did not come. Instead, a cold, dry heat began to spread through my chest. It was a sensation I recognized from work. It was the feeling I got when a system failed, when an engine reading went red, when a storm front closed a corridor. It was the shift from observation to damage control. Crying was for people who hoped their pain would change the behavior of others. I knew, with absolute certainty, that my pain meant nothing to them. If I cried to them, they would call me dramatic. If I shouted, they would call me unstable. They would rewrite the narrative until I was the villain for begrudging them a family vacation. So I would not cry. I would calculate. I unlocked my phone again, but I did not open my text messages. I opened my Notes app. I created a new folder. I named it simply Evidence. I thought about the money I had saved for a house, the years of overtime, the holidays I worked while they sat around a tree I had paid for. I remembered the time I told Mom I wanted to go to grad school, and she asked how I would help Caleb if I was paying tuition. I remembered the time Dad told me I was too uptight about money, right after asking to borrow $500 for a new golf club. They had trained me to be their banker, but they forgot that bankers kept records. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. Tonight, I was an auditor, and I was going to conduct the most thorough audit this family had ever seen. I stood up and walked out of the break room. Back onto the floor, the lights of the control center washed over me. I felt strange, hollowed out, but lighter. The burden of trying to please them was gone, replaced by the singularity of a new mission. I sat down at my desk. I did not unlock the blocked numbers. I did not check my social media to see if they were posting about their upcoming adventure. I opened a fresh document on my personal laptop. I began to type, Incident Report. Date, February 10th. Subject, Unauthorized Financial Access and Identity Theft. I was not going to argue with them. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of a fight they could spin. I was going to build a dossier. I was going to stack every receipt, every timestamp, every IP address, and every lie into a wall so high they would never be able to climb over it again. My colleague Marcus rolled his chair over, holding a fresh pot of coffee. "You look intense." "Ari," he said, "everything good?" I looked at him, and for the first time that night, I smiled. It was a small, razor-thin smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Everything is clear, Marcus," I said, just balancing the books. I turned back to the screen. The cursor blinked. A steady, rhythmic pulse. It looked like a heartbeat. It looked like a countdown. Item 1. I typed, the unauthorized purchase of 5 international airfares. I was staying behind, just like they asked, but I was going to make sure that when they tried to come back, the runway would be closed. The voice on the other end of the line was no longer the generic intake agent. I had been escalated to a senior fraud specialist, a man who introduced himself as David. He spoke with the clipped, neutral tone of someone who spent his nights untangling financial ruins. "Ms. Chapman," he said, I am looking at the access logs for the transaction. There is a complication. The system is not flagging this as a stolen card number used by a stranger. It is flagging it as a transaction made by an authorized user. I gripped the phone tighter. The plastic casing creaked. That is impossible. I said, I am the sole account holder. I had an authorized user card for my brother, Caleb, 4 years ago, but I canceled it. I personally cut the plastic into 4 pieces and watched the chips fall into the trash. I called the bank to confirm the removal. I see that record, David said, but the authorized user status was reactivated on January 12th. A replacement card was expedited to an alternate address. The air in the control center felt suddenly thin, as if the oxygen scrubbers had failed. Reactivated how? I asked. My voice was low, barely a whisper. Through your online banking portal, he replied. The request was authenticated with a login using your username and password. The 2-factor authentication code was sent to a mobile number ending in 4582. My stomach turned over. That was not my number. That was Caleb's number. But that is not my phone number on file. I said, It is now, David said. Or rather, it was changed to that number on January 12th at 10 in the morning, 10 minutes before the card request was made. Then, 3 days ago, it was changed back to your number. I felt a cold sweat prickle along my hairline. This was not just theft. This was an invasion. They had walked into my digital life, rearranged the furniture to suit their needs, and then put everything back exactly where it was, so I would not notice until the bill came. I need the IP addresses, I said. I need the device fingerprints. I need every login timestamp from the last 60 days. We can provide that to law enforcement. David said, Include it in the dispute file. I snapped. I am not just disputing a charge. I am building a case for identity fraud. If you do not give me the data, I will subpoena it. There was a pause. I will see what I can attach to the claim, he said. I hung up and turned back to my screens. My hands were trembling, but my mind was racing at Mach speed. If they had changed the phone number to intercept the bank codes, they needed to make sure I did not see the email notifications that said, Your profile has been updated. I tabbed back to my email settings. I had already found the rule sending transaction alerts to the trash, but I dug deeper. I went into the forwarding settings. There it was. Forward a copy of all incoming mail to Daphne, archive, files@gmail.com. Daphne, my mother. It was not a brute force hack. It was a back door, a permanent siphon attached to my inbox. Every bill, every personal letter, every password reset link I received was being silently copied and sent to her. She had been reading my life for who knows how long. I felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with money. It was visceral. I remembered sending emails to a therapist about my anxiety 2 months ago. Had she read those? I remembered emailing a friend about how lonely I felt during the holidays. Had she read that and laughed? I forced myself to stop shaking. Emotion was a variable I could not afford. I needed to know the extent of the damage. I went back to the bank statement. I had focused on the flights because the number was so large it triggered the alert. But now, with the knowledge that they had access since January 12th, I scrolled back. The lines of data blurred and then sharpened into focus. January 14th, Tech World Electronics, $450. January 20th, City Bistro, $280. February 2nd, Lakeside Concierge Services, $1,200. February 5th, Airport Long-Term Parking Prepay, $450. I pulled up the calculator app, $7,250 for the flights, plus the electronics, plus the dinner, plus the concierge, plus the parking. The total was not $7,000. It was $9,540. I stared at the number. $9,540. That was almost exactly the amount I had in my emergency savings. The money I had mentioned to my father during a rare moment of vulnerability when I told him I finally felt secure. He had nodded, patted my hand, and said, "It is good you are so responsible. Ariana." He had been scouting. I looked at the date of the first breach. January 12th. I pulled my personal cell phone out of my bag. I opened my call history. I scrolled back. January 12th. 10 in the morning. Incoming call. Mom. Duration. 45 minutes. I remembered that call. I had been at work, on a break. She had called me, sounding unusually sweet. She had asked about my job. She had kept me on the line, asking vague, circling questions about how the banking app worked because she was having trouble with hers. She asked if I liked the new interface. She asked if I used the fingerprint login or the password. She had been distracting me while she kept me talking, keeping my phone engaged so I would not notice a notification pop up. Someone else, Caleb, undoubtedly, was logging into my account, changing the phone number, and verifying the new device. I scrolled to February 2nd, the day of the mysterious $1,200 concierge charge. Incoming call. Dad. Duration. 20 minutes. He had called to ask about the weather. He never called about the weather. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to swallow bile. The affection was fake. The check-ins were tactical. Every time they had reached out to me in the last month, it was not because they missed me, it was because they were synchronizing a heist. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it the timeline. I created columns: date, time, transaction amount, merchant, family interaction. I began to enter the data. January 12th, 10 a.m., reactivation of authorized user. Coincides with call from mother. January 14th, $450. Headphones. Coincides with text from Tessa asking if I was working late. February 2nd, $1,200. Concierge fee. Coincides with call from father. The pattern was undeniable. It was a synchronized attack. They had turned our relationship into a series of diversionary tactics. They had weaponized their own presence in my life. I looked at the entry for the concierge services. That one stood out. You do not pay a concierge fee for a simple vacation booking unless you are renting something private, something that requires a deposit and a middleman. I highlighted the cell. That was a loose thread. I typed in the final total at the bottom of the sheet, $9,540. My family was gone. The people I thought were merely selfish were actually predators. They had hunted me. They had studied my habits, my schedule, and my finances. I saved the file. I backed it up to a cloud drive they did not know about. Then I saved it to a USB drive attached to my keychain. My heart rate had slowed down to a rhythmic thud. The panic was gone. In its place was the cold, hard resolve of a crash investigator sifting through the wreckage. I knew exactly what happened. Now I just had to prove it to the world, and I had to make sure that when I presented the black box recording of this disaster, they had nowhere to hide. I looked at the clock. It was 3 in the morning. My shift was only half over. I picked up my headset. Center, this is Chapman, I said into the mic. I am back on the desk. I was ready to work. I had a lot of planes to land, and one entire family to dismantle. The glow of the monitors was the only light I had. And in that artificial twilight, I went to war. It was not a war of shouting matches or thrown vases. It was a war of permissions, encryptions, and access logs. I treated my digital identity like a compromised aircraft. I had to ground everything, inspect every rivet, and only clear it for takeoff when I was the solely authorized pilot. I started with the two-factor authentication. My family had exploited the weakness of SMS verification, knowing they could intercept a text message if they had my phone or had cloned my number on the account. I nuked that option. I switched every critical account, banking, retirement, email, even my utilities, to a hardware-based authentication app generated on a device they did not know existed. I had an old tablet in my bag I used for reading. I registered the authenticator there. Unless they physically mugged me, they were locked out. Next came the device audit. I pulled up the list of trusted devices on my Google account. Ariana's laptop, Ariana's phone, iPhone 15 Pro. Last active, 2 hours ago. iPad Air. Last active, 4 hours ago. I did not own an iPad Air. They had not just opened a window, they had moved in. I hit the sign out button on the alien devices with a force that nearly cracked my trackpad. A grim satisfaction washed over me as I imagined the screens going black in their hands, the sudden re-enter password prompts popping up to interrupt their scrolling. Then I went to the credit bureaus. This was the nuclear option, but after seeing the flight charges, I knew I was dealing with financial predators, not just family. I logged into Equifax first. I scanned the recent activity section. My breath hitched. There was a soft inquiry dated 3 days ago. Quickland Solutions. A soft inquiry usually meant a background check for a pre-approved offer, or someone testing the waters to see if a social security number was viable for a loan. I had never heard of Quickland Solutions. I had not applied for a loan. I was not looking for a mortgage. They were shopping my credit score. They had maxed out my cash reserves. And now they were trying to leverage my future. They were looking to take out a personal loan in my name, likely to cover the other debts they had accrued. If that inquiry turned into a hard pull, into a loan disbursement, I would be on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars. I initiated a credit freeze immediately. I did it for Equifax. I did it for Experian. I did it for TransUnion. I set up a PIN that was a random string of numbers I had never used before, not a birthday, not an anniversary, nothing they could guess. Your credit file is now frozen. The screen read, "No new creditors can access your report." I felt a phantom door slam shut in their faces, but the physical world was still a vulnerability. If they had access to my bank, they might have ordered replacement cards, if they ordered cards. Those cards had to go somewhere. I remembered the mail key. My mother had a spare key to my apartment for emergencies. She had access to my mailbox. I opened a new tab and searched for private mailboxes in a town 20 minutes away from where I lived. I rented a box online, paying the fee with a credit card I had just unfrozen for 30 seconds and then refrozen. I drafted a request to the post office to divert all my mail to this new box effective immediately. I was effectively moving without moving. I was severing the physical line of communication. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from my mother. "Ariana, pick up. We are worried about you. Why are you blocking Caleb? He's crying." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Caleb was 30. If he was crying, it was because his free ride just hit a brick wall. I did not type out a paragraph about how they were thieves. I did not ask, "How could you?" I typed a single sentence. "All inquiries regarding the unauthorized transaction on my account have been forwarded to the Fraud Investigation Unit. Please refer to case number 4920. Send." Then came a text from Tessa. "Ari, this is getting out of hand. We can explain. Don't ruin this for everyone," I replied. "Please direct all communication to the fraud department." I was a broken record. I was a loop of bureaucratic indifference. I knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to get emotional. They wanted me to scream, "I hate you," so they could show the text to the rest of the family and say, "See? Look how unstable she is." We tried to include her and she snapped. I would not give them the ammunition. I would give them case numbers. I opened my work email and drafted a message to the support team of the travel portal. Global Sky Travel. This had to be precise. To the Fraud and Security Department. I wrote, "I am disputing a transaction made on February 10th. I require a full log of the booking session, including the IP address of the device used, the browser fingerprint, and the email address used to receive the confirmation receipt. This information is required for an active police report." I was not sure if I would file a police report yet, but they did not know that. The threat of legal action usually greased the wheels of corporate compliance. I opened my spreadsheet again, my war room. I added a new tab. Communication log. Time, 0330 hours. Received text from Daphne Chapman. Content: emotional appeal regarding Caleb. Response: directed to fraud case number. Time, 0332 hours. Received text from Tessa Chapman. Content: accusation of ruining the trip. Response: directed to fraud case number. I was turning my life into a deposition. A shadow fell across my desk. I looked up to see Captain Miller standing there. He was a senior pilot who had transitioned to ops management after a medical grounding. He had gray hair, eyes that had seen everything from engine fires to mid-air collisions, and a demeanor that suggested nothing could surprise him. He had been watching me type. He saw the spreadsheets. He saw the credit report on the other screen. He saw the tight, pale line of my jaw. "Trouble on the home front?" he asked. It was not prying. It was an assessment. I nodded once, stiffly. "Significant financial irregularities," I said, keeping it professional. He took a sip of his coffee, looking at the screens, then back at me. He did not ask for details. He did not offer platitudes about how family is family. "You know the rule about a stall spin?" "Ariana?" he asked. "You nose down to regain airspeed." I said, "You fight the instinct to pull up." "Exactly," he said. "When you are in a spin, your instincts lie to you. You want to pull back, to save it, but that just kills you faster. You have to do the counterintuitive thing. You have to be cold." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a rumble. "Whatever they did, do not solve it with your heart. Your heart will want to forgive, or it will want to explode. Both are dangerous right now. Solve it with evidence. Paper trails do not lie. People do." He tapped the edge of my desk twice, then walked away. Solve it with evidence. He was right. If I engaged with them, I lost. If I let them drag me into a conversation about feelings, they would twist my words until I sounded like the aggressor. They were counting on my guilt. They were banking on the fact that I had always been the fixer. But you cannot fix a parasite. You can only remove it. I looked at the soft inquiry on my credit report again. They had tried to open a loan. They had tried to sell my future to pay for their present. I felt a shift inside me. The last remnants of the dutiful daughter evaporated. I was no longer Ariana the provider. I was Ariana the prosecutor. I opened a map of the city. I began to look for apartment listings. Not for next month, for next week. If they had keys, if they had my mail, if they knew my routine, I was compromised. I needed a new base of operations. I would disappear from their view while remaining in plain sight. I would let them scream into the void of my silence while I built the walls of their prison. Brick by brick, receipt by receipt. The phone buzzed again. My father this time. "Ariana, pick up the phone. This is ridiculous." I logged the time. I logged the content. I did not reply. Let them panic. Let them realize that the ATM was not just out of order. It had been removed from the premises entirely. The tap on my shoulder did not come from a colleague offering coffee. It came from the shift supervisor, a woman named Karen who usually avoided the floor unless someone had violated a federal safety protocol. "Ariana," she said. Her voice was low, laced with a professional pity that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Henderson needs to see you in his office. Now." Mr. Henderson was the director of operations. You did not get called into his office for a chat. You got called in for a termination or a commendation. Given the look on Karen's face, I knew it was not the latter. I removed my headset. I locked my terminal. I walked the long gray corridor to the corner office, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that I refused to let show on my face. When I entered, Henderson was sitting behind his desk, looking at a file. He did not look angry. He looked concerned. That was worse. Concern in a corporate setting is usually the precursor to a liability assessment. "Sit down." "Ariana," he said. I sat. I kept my back straight. I folded my hands in my lap. "We received a phone call regarding you about an hour ago." He began. "It was from a Daphne Chapman. She identified herself as your mother." I felt the blood drain from my face, but I did not flinch. Of course, she had realized I was not answering her texts, so she had escalated to the one place I could not ignore. She had targeted my livelihood. She expressed some serious concerns about your well-being. Henderson continued, leaning forward. "She stated that you have been exhibiting signs of severe exhaustion. She mentioned you have been acting paranoid, erratic, and that you might be in the middle of a mental health crisis. She used the phrase, risk of self-destruction." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like toxic smoke. "Ariana, in this line of work, mental acuity is non-negotiable. If you are compromised, If you are hallucinating or suffering from paranoia, we cannot have you on the floor. We have a mandatory fitness for duty protocol. I am going to have to ask you to step down from the rotation pending a psychological evaluation. The brilliance of her attack was sickening. She knew exactly what buttons to push. She did not accuse me of a crime. She accused me of being unwell. She painted me as the victim of my own mind, making herself the concerned, loving mother trying to save her daughter from a breakdown. If I got angry, I proved her right. If I cried, I proved her right. If I shouted that she was a liar, I sounded exactly like a paranoid person claiming everyone was against them. I took a deep breath. I looked Henderson in the eye. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady and cool. "I have been with this airline for 6 years. My on-time performance rating is in the top 5%. I have 0 safety violations. I am currently 10 hours into my shift, and I have successfully routed 42 flights without incident. Does that sound like the record of someone in a crisis?" He hesitated. "Your performance has been solid, Ariana, but family usually sees things we do not. She was very convincing. She said you were making up stories about people stealing from you. I reached into my bag. I did not pull out a tissue. I pulled out the folder I had printed 3 hours ago. I placed it on his desk. I am not making up stories," I said, "and I am not having a breakdown. I am the victim of a coordinated financial crime involving identity theft and credit card fraud, totaling $9,540. I opened the folder. "Here is the police report case number filed this morning," I said, pointing to the top document. "Here is the fraud affidavit from the bank. Here is the log of unauthorized access to my accounts, traced to an IP address that matches my brother's residence." Henderson looked down. He saw the numbers. He saw the red ink. He saw the word fraud stamped on the bank letterhead. "My family is currently attempting to discredit me because I have cut off their access to my finances and initiated a criminal investigation," I said. "This call was not an act of concern. It was a tactical strike to destroy my credibility so that when the police interview them, they can claim I am mentally unstable and imagining the theft." I pushed the paper forward. "If you suspend me based on the word of a person currently under investigation for bank fraud, I believe that would be a significant error in judgment." Henderson picked up the bank affidavit. He read it. He looked at the timestamp on the flight booking. He looked at the IP address log. The look of concern on his face evaporated, replaced by the hard edge of a man who realized he was being played, and not by me. He closed the folder and handed it back to me. "I see," he said. His voice was different now. It was respectful. "I am sorry you are dealing with this. Ariana," I stood up. "Thank you, sir. I am fully capable of performing my duties. My personal life is being handled by the authorities, unless there is a performance issue on the floor. I would like to return to my desk. Go back to work," he said. "And Ariana? If she calls again, the reception desk will be instructed to block the number." I walked out of the office. I had won the battle, but the war was expanding. As soon as I got back to my desk, my personal phone, which I had left face down, lit up with a different kind of notification. It was not a text. It was a tag. I opened the social media app I rarely used. Tessa, my sister-in-law, had posted a photo. It was a picture of her, Caleb, and my parents, looking sad and huddled together. The caption was a masterpiece of vague booking. "Heartbroken today. It is so hard when you try to include family in your happiness, and they turn around and try to destroy it out of jealousy. Some people are so toxic they would rather burn bridges than see their own brother smile. Please pray for our family as we deal with a very selfish situation." She did not tag me directly. She did not name me. She did not have to. The comments were already rolling in from aunts, cousins, and family friends. "Oh no, what happened? Is this about Ariana? I always knew she was difficult. Sending prayers. Jealousy is such an ugly disease. Stay strong. Tessa. You guys don't deserve that negativity." Then the direct messages started. My Aunt Carol, my cousin Mike, even a neighbor I had not seen in 3 years. Ariana. Just saw Tessa's post. Are you okay? Call me. Ari, why are you doing this to your mom? She is worried sick. You need to apologize to Caleb. Family comes first. I stared at the screen. The nausea I had felt earlier was gone. In its place was a profound understanding of how the trap worked. They did not need my permission to spend my money. They took it. And now, they did not need my participation to ruin my reputation. They were crowdsourcing the narrative. They were building a wall of public opinion where I was the villain, the bitter, lonely spinster sister who was jealous of her brother's happiness and was punishing them by making up stories about money. If I commented on the post and said they stole $10,000 from me, I would look petty. I would look like I was airing dirty laundry. I would look exactly like the crazy person my mother told my boss I was. They had weaponized the concept of privacy. They knew I was private. They knew I hated drama. They were betting everything on the fact that I would stay silent to avoid a scene. But they had miscalculated one thing. I was not silent because I was afraid. I was silent because I was building my case. I took a screenshot of Tessa's post. I took screenshots of the comments. I took screenshots of the timestamp showing she posted it 10 minutes after my mother called my boss. I added them to the evidence folder. I did not reply to Aunt Carol. I did not reply to Cousin Mike. I did not comment on the post. I realized then that I could never explain my way out of this. Words were their weapon. They were better at lying than I was at telling the truth, because the truth was messy and boring and involved IP addresses, while their lies were emotional and catchy. So I would not speak. I would not text. I would not argue. From this moment on, the only thing that would speak for me would be a court summons. The only thing that would speak for me would be a certified letter from a lawyer. I looked at Tessa's post one last time, at the fake sadness in my brother's eyes, the performative grief of my mother. You want a show? I thought, I will give you a show, but the finale is not going to be a family vacation. It is going to be a foreclosure. I put the phone away. I turned back to my monitors. The airspace over Chicago was getting crowded. I had work to do, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who the enemy was. The vibration of my phone against the desk surface felt like a ticking bomb. I had silenced the calls from my family, but the notifications from the outside world were still filtering through. A direct message request appeared on the social media app I had just used to screenshot Tessa's smear campaign. It was from a user named Sloan Miller. I froze. I scrolled back to the initial fraud alert I had printed out 3 hours ago. Passenger 5. Sloan Miller. The stranger on the ticket list. I clicked accept. The message appeared instantly, accompanied by a typing bubble that pulsed with frantic energy. I saw Tessa's post. The message read, I do not know if you remember me. I lived with Caleb 4 years ago. Before he met Tessa, I think we need to talk. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, You are listed as the 5th passenger on a flight itinerary charged to my card this morning. 3 seconds later, a photo loaded on my screen. It was not a selfie. It was a screenshot of a bank statement from 4 years ago. Wells Fargo checking, overdraft fee, $35. Purchase, Best Buy Electronics. Amount, $2,400. Then came the text. He did this to me too. Sloan wrote, We were dating. He said he wanted to buy a new gaming setup but was short on cash until payday. He memorized my debit card number while I was in the shower. He drained my rent money. When I confronted him, he cried. He said his mother told him it was okay because we were partners. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. His mother told him? He bragged about it. Sloan continued. He said Daphne taught him that family resources are fluid. He said she has a way of getting information. She calls it the master key. I stared at the words, master key. My computer pinged. A new email from the fraud department at Global Sky Travel. I had sent the request only an hour ago, expecting a delay of days, but the threat of a police report had evidently fast-tracked my ticket to the top of the pile. Dear Ms. Chapman, regarding your inquiry about the booking reference number ending in 992, The transaction was verified using our secure upload portal. The user provided a high-resolution image of the physical credit card, front and back, as well as a scanned color copy of a government-issued driver's license matching the cardholder's name to bypass the high-value transaction filter. They had not just typed in numbers, they had uploaded photos. I closed my eyes, and the memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. 6 months ago, my parents' house, the living room smelled of lemon polish and deceit. My mother had been organizing the family safe, a fireproof box she kept in the master closet. "Ariana, bring me your updated license and your main credit cards," she had said, her voice casual, fluttering over the words like they were unimportant. "I am updating the emergency file. If anything happens to you, a car accident, a coma, we need to be able to access your affairs to help you. It is just for the file. Honey, standard procedure." I had handed them over. I had stood there and watched her scan them on the flatbed scanner she kept on her desk. I had watched her place the copies into a manila folder labeled Ariana. I thought I was being responsible. I thought I was part of a safety protocol. I was actually handing them the murder weapon. They had kept those scans. They had waited. And when the time came to book a vacation, they could not afford. They pulled my file from the box like they were withdrawing cash from a teller. I looked back at the email from the travel portal. There was an attachment. Invoice breakdown. I opened it. I needed to see the details of that concierge fee, the $1,200 charge I had spotted earlier. Item: luxury villa reservation deposit. Property: the Azure Cliffside. Note: reservation held under the name of the Chapman Family Trust. Non-refundable. My breath caught. It was not a hotel. It was a private villa. And they were not booking it under my name, or Caleb's name, or even my parents' names. The Chapman Family Trust. My grandmother had set up that trust 20 years ago. It was a small, modest fund, meant for education and medical emergencies. It was managed by my father's cousin, Aunt Maren, a woman who lived 2 states away and rarely spoke to us because she considered my father soft. If they were using the trust's name to book the villa, they were trying to bypass credit checks. They were using the credibility of the trust to secure a lease. I picked up my personal phone. I found the number for Maren Chapman. I had not spoken to her in 5 years. I dialed. It rang 4 times. "Hello?" Her voice was sharp, suspicious. It was late. "Aunt Maren, it is Ariana." I said, "I am sorry to call so late." There was a silence. Then, her tone shifted. Dropping an octave, "I was just looking at the ledger." "Ariana," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, as if she was afraid the walls were listening. "Why is your brother's name on a withdrawal request for $4,000? My stomach dropped. $4,000. "He does not have authorization." I said, "He has a letter." Maren said, "It looks like it is signed by your father. It claims the money is for emergency medical expenses for you. It says you are in a treatment facility." The room spun. They were not just stealing my money to go on vacation. They were building a narrative that I was incapacitated, that I was in a mental health facility, to justify raiding the family trust. That was why my mother had called my boss. That was why Tessa had posted about my instability. It was a setup. They needed me to be crazy, so they could legally plunder the archives. "I am not in a facility." "Maren," I said, my voice trembling with a cold, hard rage. "I am at work. I am the shift commander at the operations center. They are lying. They are using my name to embezzle the trust." There was a long pause on the other end. Then I heard the sound of typing. "I see," Maren said. Her voice was no longer suspicious. It was steel. "The withdrawal is pending. It clears tomorrow morning." "Stop it," I said. "Freeze the trust." "I am doing it now," she said. "And Ariana?" "Yes. I am looking at the history. This is not the first time. There are small withdrawals going back 6 months. Car repairs, dental work, all signed off by your father, all paid to Caleb." I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of the control room, the hum of the servers sounding like a distant ocean. I looked at the pieces of the puzzle scattered across my screens: the credit card fraud, the identity theft, the social media smear campaign, the raid on the trust fund. It wasn't just a vacation. It wasn't just a trip to Italy. My family was broke. They were drowning. Caleb's lifestyle, my parents' refusal to hold him accountable, the soft inquiries on my credit report, it all pointed to one thing: they were insolvent. They were using this trip not as a celebration, but as a final desperate heave to maintain the illusion of success before the walls came down. They were robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I was Peter. The concierge fee was a deposit on a rental they probably intended to squat in, or sublet, or use as a base while they ran from creditors here. I looked at the flight itinerary again. One-way tickets. I had missed that detail in the first panic. They were not round trip. They were not coming back, or at least, they didn't plan to pay for the return. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was the calm of a pilot who finally sees the runway through the fog. I knew where I was now. I was not dealing with a family dispute. I was dealing with a criminal enterprise, and a criminal enterprise is like a house of cards. It looks solid from a distance, but if you pull out the right card, the one card that holds the weight of the lie, the whole thing collapses. I looked at the invoice from Global Sky Travel. I looked at the email from Sloan. I looked at the notes from Aunt Marin. I had the card. I picked up my pen and opened a new file. I was not going to scream. I was not going to post on Facebook. I was going to draft an invoice. If they wanted to treat our relationship like a transaction, I would give them the bill, and this time, the price would include interest. The document on my screen did not look like a letter from a daughter to her parents. It looked like a subpoena. I used the standard Arial font, size 11, double-spaced. There were no emoticons, no exclamation points, and absolutely no apologies. At the top, centered in bold, I typed, "Notice of unauthorized financial activity and demand for restitution." I treated the last 6 weeks of my life as a forensic accounting exercise. I listed every single transaction that had bypassed my consent. Item 1. January 14th, Tech World Electronics, $450. Item 2. January 20th, City Bistro, $280. Item 3. February 2nd, Lakeside Concierge Services, $1,200. Item 4. February 5th, Airport Parking Services, $450. Item 5. February 10th, Global Sky Travel, $7,250. Total outstanding balance, $9,540. I stared at the cursor blinking at the bottom of the page. It was a staggering amount of money. It was a down payment on a car. It was 6 months of rent in a decent neighborhood. It was the price of my trust, liquidated and spent on noise-canceling headphones and villa deposits. Below the total, I added the terms of engagement. I did not ask them to pay me back when they could. I did not ask them to try their best. Payment in full is required within 7 business days via certified cashier's check. Failure to remit payment will result in the immediate escalation of file number 4920 with the fraud department and the filing of a civil suit for damages and legal fees. I added 2 more conditions. Condition 1. Cease and desist all communication with my employer immediately. Condition 2. Surrender all physical and digital copies of my identification documents, including the driver's license scanned on August 15th. I saved the file as a PDF. It felt heavy. Final. I opened my email client. I added the recipients: Daphne Chapman, Gordon Chapman, Caleb Chapman, Tessa Chapman. Then, I moved my cursor to the blind carbon copy field. The BCC line is the most dangerous weapon in corporate warfare because it allows you to have a witness the other party does not know is in the room. I typed, Marin Chapman. If my parents thought they could spin this as a misunderstanding, they would have to do it while the trustee of the family fund watched them in silence. Marin would see the dates. She would see the amounts. She would see that while they were trying to raid the trust for medical emergencies, they were simultaneously spending nearly $10,000 on a luxury vacation. I hit send. I did not wait for the fallout. I stood up, packed my laptop, and walked out of the apartment I no longer felt safe in. I had already booked a small cabin 3 hours north, in a town called Grand Marais. It was the off-season. It would be cold, gray, and empty, exactly what I needed. I was on the highway, watching the city skyline shrink in my rearview mirror. When the phone started, it began with a text from my mother. "Ariana, what is this? Is this a joke?" Then a call from my father. I let it go to voicemail. Then a barrage from Caleb. "You sent an invoice? Seriously? We are family, not a corporation. You are being insane. Answer the phone. Ari, Mom is crying. You are killing her. It was just a loan. We were going to pay you back after the trip." I drove on. The road was a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through the snow-covered pine trees. My phone was mounted on the dashboard, flashing every 30 seconds with a new plea, a new threat, a new angle of manipulation. I pulled over at a rest stop near Duluth, just long enough to send one message. I copied and pasted it to the group chat they had created to yell at me. All responses must be submitted in writing to the email address provided. Phone calls will not be answered. Then I turned off notifications for the messaging app. When I arrived at the cabin, it was dark. The air smelled of wood smoke and ice. I unlocked the door, threw my bag on the bed, and sat down on the porch wrapped in a heavy blanket. The silence of the lake was absolute. There were no engines, no sirens, no buzzing phones. I opened my laptop to check the damage, not because I was worried, but because I was documenting. The family had taken their case to the court of public opinion. My Aunt Carol had posted on my timeline, "I am so disappointed in you. Ariana, sending a bill to your own parents? After everything they sacrificed for you? Money is not everything." My cousin Mike had commented, "Keep your dirty laundry off the internet. Ari, you are embarrassing the family name." Tessa had posted a long, tearful video on her story. She was sitting in her car, wiping away mascara-stained tears. "I just do not understand how someone can be so cold." She sobbed into the camera. "We tried to include her. We really did. And now she is demanding money we do not have. Threatening to call the police on her own brother. It is like she wants to see us homeless. She left out the part about the $7,000 flight tickets. She left out the identity theft. She left out the villa deposit. She framed it as if I was randomly demanding cash from destitute relatives." I watched the view count on the video tick up. 45 views. 60 views. A week ago, this would have destroyed me. I would have been frantic, calling them, apologizing, trying to explain that no, that is not what happened. Please believe me. I would have paid the $10,000 just to make the video go away, but tonight, sitting in the cold air, I felt nothing. No, that was not true. I felt something. I felt like a scientist looking at a petri dish. I was observing a specimen. I took screenshots of Aunt Carol's comment. I saved Tessa's video. I logged the timestamps of the text messages threatening me. February 11th, 8:30 in the evening. Caleb Chapman text. "You better fix this, or you are dead to us." February 11th, 9 o'clock. Daphne Chapman voicemail. "Ariana, I do not know who is influencing you, but this is evil. You are destroying this family over paper." Every insult was a brick. They were building the wall for me. They were proving my case with every unhinged reaction. If this ever went to a judge, I would not have to say a word. I would just play the tapes. I realized then that my fear of them had been the only thing holding the relationship together. I had been afraid of their anger. I had been afraid of their rejection. I had been afraid of being the bad daughter, but looking at the frozen lake. I understood the physics of the situation. You can only be blackmailed if you have shame, and I had no shame left to give. I had done nothing wrong. I was not the one who stole. I was not the one who lied. I was not the one who tried to commit fraud against a trust fund. They were screaming because they were losing control. They were loud because they were powerless. I opened a bottle of wine I had bought at a gas station. It was cheap, bitter red wine, but it tasted like victory. I checked my email one last time before closing the laptop. There was a notification from the bank. Dispute update. Provisional credit of $9,540 has been applied to your account pending final investigation. And right below it, a short email from Aunt Marin. It did not have a subject line. The body of the email was just 2 sentences. I received your document. The trust accounts have been frozen for an internal audit effective immediately. I smiled. It was the first real smile I had worn in days. They were busy fighting a war on Facebook, trying to win the sympathy of Cousin Mike and Aunt Carol. Meanwhile, I had just cut off their supply lines. I took a sip of wine and watched the moon reflect off the ice. Let them talk. Let them post. Let them scream until their throats were raw. I was not listening anymore. I was waiting for the check. The glow of my laptop screen was the only source of light in the cabin, casting long, shivering shadows against the log walls. Outside, the wind off Lake Superior was howling, a physical manifestation of the storm I had unleashed. I sat there, wrapped in a wool blanket, watching the digital disintegration of my family. Caleb had decided to double down. He had posted a long, rambling status update on his profile. Tagged, "Feeling betrayed." It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. "It is funny how money changes people," he wrote. "You think you know your sister. You think she is the one person who has your back. But then she gets jealous that the rest of us are trying to have one nice memory together, and she decides to punish us. She is actually threatening legal action because she is bitter she was not invited. I feel sorry for her. Imagine being so lonely you have to sue your own family to get attention." The comments section was initially a chorus of sympathy. "Stay strong. Caleb." That is toxic behavior. Family is everything. I took a sip of my wine. I did not type a rebuttal. I did not need to, because Sloan Miller had entered the chat. She did not post a rant. She posted a screenshot directly into the comments of Caleb's post. It was a Venmo transaction history from 4 years ago, juxtaposed with the dates I had listed in my invoice, which he had evidently pieced together from Tessa's earlier complaints. "That is interesting. Caleb," Sloan wrote, "because on January 14th, you texted me asking to borrow $450 for emergency car repairs. You said your transmission blew, but according to the timeline Ariana just sent the family, that is the exact same day a charge for $450 appeared on her card for noise-canceling headphones at Tech World." The comment sat there like a grenade. Then she posted another one. "And on February 2nd, you asked our old roommate Mark for money because you were short on rent. You got $1,200 from him. That is the same day the concierge fee hit Ariana's account. You were not paying rent. You were double-dipping. You were stealing from her to book the trip, and stealing from your friends to have pocket money for it." The sympathy in the comments section evaporated. The stay strong messages stopped. Then, a comment from Aunt Carol appeared. Carol, who had just scolded me an hour ago, was now looking at the math. "Wait a minute." Carol wrote, "Daphne told me last week that the reason they could not come to the reunion was that they were spending all their savings on remodeling the kitchen. She sent me pictures of granite samples. If they are broke, how are they remodeling? And if they are remodeling, why are they using Ariana's card for a vacation?" The narrative was fracturing. They had told too many lies to too many different people. To me, they were poor. To Carol, they were renovating. To Caleb's friends, they were victims of bad luck. To the bank, they were me. I decided this was the moment. I opened my email client. I did not write a long, emotional letter. I did not defend my character. I simply attached one single page from the PDF I had prepared. It was the summary page. Total unauthorized charges, $9,540. Status, fraud investigation, pending, action required, immediate restitution. I sent it to the entire extended family mailing list. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone they had dragged into this court of public opinion. I hit send and waited for 10 minutes. The phone was silent. The group chat, which had been buzzing with insults toward me, went dead. It was the silence of a room where someone had just turned on the lights at an ugly party. Then, the tone shifted. My cousin Mike, the one who told me I was embarrassing the family, texted, "Holy cow, Ari. Is this real? Did they actually spend $9,000? Aunt Carol messaged, "I just called your mother. She is not picking up. Ariana, please tell me this is a mistake." I did not reply. Then my father's number popped up. He did not leave a voicemail this time. He sent a text. The bluster was gone. The "I am the patriarch" tone had vanished. "Ariana, we need to speak. You are using words like fraud and investigation. These are serious terms. We can work this out. We can set up a payment plan. Please recall the file from the bank. If they get involved, it becomes a federal matter. You do not want that for your brother." He was scared. He finally understood that I was not looking for an apology. I was looking for a conviction. He knew that unauthorized use of a credit device across state lines was not a family squabble. It was a felony. I watched his bubble appear and disappear, as if he was typing and deleting, trying to find the magic combination of words that would turn me back into his obedient daughter. Then, my phone rang. It was Tessa. I hesitated. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something about the persistence of the ring, it wasn't angry. It felt desperate, made me swipe right. I put it on speaker and set it on the rough wood table. "Ari?" Her voice was shaking. She sounded like she was hiding in a bathroom. There was an echo. "I am listening." I said, "I did not know." She whispered, "I swear to God. Ari, I did not know it was your card. Caleb told me he got a bonus. He said the trust fund paid out early. You knew I was not invited." I said, "You knew I was staying behind because Mom said I could not afford it. Did you not think it was strange that the broke sister was suddenly funding the trip?" She started to cry. Not the fake crying from her video. This was the terrified sobbing of a woman realizing she was married to a con artist. "Mom told me not to ask questions," Tessa stammered. "She said she was handling the finances. She said she had a system." "What system?" "Tessa?" I asked. My voice was ice. "She said she had a way to keep things separate so Dad would not stress. She said, she has this address." I sat up straighter. "What address?" "She has a private mailbox," Tessa said, "over in West Ellsbury. She told me if I ever ordered anything expensive, to have it sent there so Dad would not see the packages coming to the house. She calls it her safety box. She said that is where the paperwork goes." My blood ran cold. West Ellsbury was 3 towns over. It was nowhere near where my parents lived. And then it clicked. The replacement credit card. The one the bank said was mailed to an alternate address on January 12th. I had assumed they intercepted the mail at my apartment or their own house. I was wrong. My mother had set up a dedicated drop point for fraud. She had a physical location where she could receive credit cards, loan applications, and bank statements in my name, or anyone else's name, without her husband or neighbors seeing. That was not keeping things separate. That was a criminal outpost. "Tessa," I said, "do you have the address? I think I saw it on a slip of paper in her purse once." She said, "Box 402 at the Pack and Ship on Main." "Thank you." I said, "Wait, Ari?" Tessa cried. "What are you going to do? Caleb is pacing the floor. He is saying you are going to put him in jail. He says Mom told him it was legal because they are your next of kin." I hung up. I sat there in the dark, the wind rattling the window pane. Next of kin. They truly believed that. They believed that because we shared DNA, my identity was their property. They believed that my credit score was a communal resource, like a shared Netflix password. But the P.O. box changed everything. You do not rent a secret mailbox 3 towns over to hide a few Amazon packages from your husband. You rent it to build a second life. You rent it to receive driver's licenses you scanned in your living room. You rent it to harvest identities. This was not just about mooching. This was not just a lazy brother and an enabling mother. My mother was running an identity theft operation, and I was likely not the only victim. I opened my laptop again. I pulled up the contact information for the Postal Inspection Service. My father was worried about a fraud investigation. He had no idea. He should have been worried about the feds. I typed the address Tessa gave me into my notes. Box 402. The house of cards was not just falling down. I was about to light the table on fire. The text message from my mother arrived on Friday afternoon, vibrating against the wooden table of the cabin like a trapped insect. Ariana, enough is enough. We need to settle this once and for all. Sunday, 5 o'clock, family dinner. Come home and let us fix this. It was the tone of a woman who was used to sweeping shattered glass under a rug and calling the floor clean. Come home. As if the location of the crime was the only place where forgiveness could be manufactured. I did not reply immediately, in a negotiation. Silence is leverage. If I answered too quickly, it would look like I was eager for their approval. If I waited, it would look like I was weighing my options. I spent the next 24 hours turning my laptop into a war room. I reviewed every file in the evidence folder. I had the timeline of the bank logins. I had the IP addresses. I had the email from the travel portal confirming the upload of my scanned license. I had the screenshots of Tessa's smear campaign and the subsequent comments where the narrative fell apart. I printed it all. I did not bind it in a thick, dramatic manuscript. I used a simple, black clip. It was thin, precise, and lethal. It was not a memoir of my feelings. It was an index of their felonies. On Saturday morning, I met with a legal consultant. He was not a high-priced litigator, just a friend of a former colleague who specialized in civil disputes and family law. I met him at a coffee shop in a town halfway between the cabin and the city. I wanted to know where the line was. I'm not asking you to sue them yet, I told him, sliding the folder across the small metal table. I am asking what happens if I walk into that house and they try to coerce me into signing a waiver. He looked at the documents, his eyebrows raising as he saw the total amount. $9,540. Ariana, he said, keeping his voice low. If you go there, you are entering a hostile environment. They will try to get you to admit that you authorized this verbally. They will try to record you. Let them record. I said, I have nothing to hide. His advice was simple. Do not agree to anything that is not written down. Do not accept a verbal promise of repayment. And if you feel unsafe, leave. You are not a daughter in that house anymore. You are a creditor. I took that advice to heart. On Saturday night, I finally replied to my mother, I will be there at 5 o'clock. However, I have conditions. We will speak in the living room, not the dining room. No doors will be closed. And any agreement we reach regarding the debt must be signed in writing before I leave. I expected resistance. I expected my father to text back saying I was being difficult, or for Caleb to send another message about how I was ruining the vibe. Instead, the reply came within 30 seconds. Okay, honey, whatever makes you comfortable, we just want to see you. The speed of the agreement made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. People who are genuinely sorry take time to process conditions. People who are desperate agree to anything just to get you in the room. It felt like a trap. It felt like they had a plan B that relied entirely on my physical presence. Sunday arrived with a gray, oppressive sky. I drove back to the city in silence. I did not listen to music. I did not listen to podcasts. I rehearsed the conversation in my head. I stripped away every emotional sentence I might be tempted to say. I am hurt became the transaction was unauthorized. Why do you hate me became. The funds must be returned. I thought we were family. The police report is pending. I reached my parents' neighborhood at 4:55. The street looked exactly as it had for 20 years. The same oak trees, the same manicured lawns. It was the perfect suburban camouflage for a family that was rotting from the inside out. I approached the house, but I did not turn the wheel. I drove past the driveway. I saw my father's sedan. I saw Caleb's beat-up hatchback. I saw Tessa's SUV. They were all there, parked tightly, blocking the exit path of anyone who might park near the garage. I continued down the street, 3 houses away, and pulled to the curb. I turned off the engine. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Parking here was a deliberate tactical choice. If I parked in the driveway, they could block me in. They could stand behind my car. They could trap me by parking on the street. Facing the exit of the subdivision, I retained my agency. I could leave at any second, and there was nothing they could do to stop me physically without causing a scene in front of the neighbors. I grabbed the black folder. I checked my phone. I turned on the voice recorder app and slipped it into my blazer pocket. I stepped out into the chill air. The walk to the front door felt like walking to the gallows. But I was the executioner, not the condemned. I looked at the windows. The blinds were drawn. I reached the front porch. I had a key on my ring, a brass key I had carried since I was 16. I looked at it. Using it would imply that I still lived here, that I still belonged. I put the key back in my pocket. I raised my hand and knocked. 3 hard, distinct raps on the wood. I waited. The door opened almost instantly. It was my mother. She was wearing a floral apron, her hair perfectly coiffed, a smile plastered on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. The smell of roasting meat wafted out, the same smell from the dinner where she told me to stay behind. "Ariana," she exclaimed, reaching out to hug me. "You made it." I did not step forward. I did not lean into the embrace. I stood rigid. The folder held like a shield between us. "Hello? Mother?" I said. She faltered, her arms dropping to her sides. The smile flickered, then reasserted itself, tighter this time. "Well, come in, she said, ushering me inside. "Everyone is waiting." I stepped over the threshold. The house was warm, too warm. The air felt thick. I walked straight to the living room as I had stipulated. My father was sitting in his recliner, looking old and tired. Caleb was on the sofa, his leg bouncing nervously. Tessa was sitting next to him, staring at her hands. There was no food on the coffee table, just a silence that screamed. Gordon looked up. He tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "Hello, Ari," he said. "Glad you could make time for us." I did not sit on the couch next to Caleb. I pulled a straight-backed wooden chair from the dining area and placed it facing them, creating a distinct separation. I sat down, placing the black folder on my lap. "I am here," I said, my voice steady and devoid of warmth. "We have exactly 1 hour." My mother bustled in, wiping her hands on a towel. "Can I get you anything? Ariana, some wine? Tea?" "No," I said. "I am driving." Caleb let out a scoff, a sharp exhale of breath. "God, you are so dramatic," he muttered. "You are acting like this is a deposition." I looked at him. I looked him dead in the eye. "It is a deposition." "Caleb," I said, "the only difference is that there is no stenographer." My father cleared his throat. "Now, let us not start like this," he said, leaning forward. "We are a family. We make mistakes. We cross lines. But we do not treat each other like strangers. We asked you here because we want to fix this. Then fix it." I said. I opened the folder. I took out the summary page, the one with the $9,540 total, and placed it on the coffee table. "That is the number." I said, "I am not interested in hearing about your kitchen remodel. I am not interested in hearing about how hard Caleb's life is. I am interested in a cashier's check." My mother stopped bustling. She stood by the mantel, her face hardening. The mask of the welcoming hostess slipped, revealing the calculator underneath. "We do not have that kind of cash lying around." "Ariana," she said, her voice sharp. "You know that." "Then why did you book the trip?" I asked. "We were going to pay you back," Caleb shouted. Jumping up, "It was an investment in our mental health. We needed a break." "Sit down." "Caleb," I said. I did not raise my voice. I kept it dangerously low. He glared at me, but he sat. "We have a proposal," my father said, trying to regain control of the room. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "We cannot give you the full amount today," he said, "but we can give you this. It is a check for the $9,540. I looked at the envelope. I did not take it. "A check?" I asked. "From which account?" "From the family account," my father said. "It is all there. You take this, and you drop the fraud case with the bank. You call them right now, put it on speaker, and tell them it was a misunderstanding. You tell them you authorized the charges." I stared at the envelope. It was too easy. They claimed they were broke, yet here was a check for nearly $10,000. I reached out and took the envelope. I opened it. It was a cashier's check. The amount was correct, $9,540. But then I looked at the remitter line. It did not say Gordon Chapman. It did not say Daphne Chapman. It said Chapman Family Trust. I felt a surge of adrenaline so sharp it made my vision clarify. They had done exactly what I suspected. They had raided the trust fund, the one Aunt Marin managed, to pay me off. They were using stolen money to pay for stolen money. They were robbing my grandmother's legacy to silence my bank's investigation. And they didn't know that I had already called Marin. They didn't know the trust was frozen. This check was worthless. Or worse, if I cashed it, I would be an accomplice to embezzlement. I looked up at them. My father was watching me with a hopeful, desperate expression. My mother was watching me with defiance. Caleb was smirking, thinking he had won. "You want me to cash this?" I asked. "Yes," my father said. "Just deposit it and make the call." I placed the check back on the table. I smoothed it out with my hand. "I cannot cash this, Dad." "Why not?" he demanded. "It is money. It is what you wanted." "Because," I said, leaning back in my chair, looking at the ceiling for a brief second before locking eyes with him again. "I spoke to Aunt Marin 2 days ago. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of all the oxygen leaving the room at once. My mother's face went white. You spoke to Marin?" she whispered. "I did." I said, "She knows about the withdrawals for the medical emergencies. She knows about the villa deposit, and she froze the trust on Friday afternoon." I pointed to the check. "That piece of paper is not money. It is evidence of attempted larceny." Caleb looked at my father. "Dad, what is she talking about?" "Shut up, Caleb," my father hissed. I stood up. The power dynamic in the room had shifted violently. I was no longer the daughter pleading for fairness. I was the witness to a crime scene. I picked up my folder. I left the check on the table. "I came here to give you a chance to settle this legally." I said, "I came here to see if there was any part of you that respected me enough to use your own money to fix your mistakes. But you tried to pay me with a bounced check from a frozen trust fund." I turned to the door. "Ariana, wait!" my mother screamed. She lunged forward. Grabbing my arm, I pulled away. I did not shove her. I just disengaged, cold and efficient. "Don't," I said. I walked to the door. My heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. "You walk out that door, and you are destroying this family," my father shouted from his chair. He did not stand up. He couldn't. The weight of his own failure was pinning him down. I opened the door. The cold air hit my face, clean and sharp. "I didn't destroy this family," I said, looking back at them one last time. "I just audited it." I walked out. I walked down the path, past the manicured lawn, past the driveway blocked by their cars, and down the street to where my car was waiting. I got in. I locked the doors. I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. It looked small. It looked like a stage set that was being struck after a bad play. I put the car in drive. The final act was over. Now, the credits and the consequences would roll. The dinner began with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. My mother, Daphne, sat at the head of the table, smiling as if she were posing for a holiday card. She passed the bread rolls with a terrifying grace, acting as though the folder of evidence sitting on the sideboard did not exist. My father, Gordon, played his part too. He sighed heavily between bites, performing the role of the weary patriarch burdened by the world. Caleb refused to look at me, keeping his eyes glued to his plate, while Tessa sat frozen, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming semi-truck. They had set the stage. Now came the script. "Ariana," my father said, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "We have been talking. We want to offer a compromise." I did not pick up my fork. I just looked at him. We are willing to pay you back a portion of the funds. He continued, we can transfer $4,000 to you by next week. We will set up a payment plan for the rest, but in exchange, we need you to do something for us. He paused, waiting for me to nod. I did not nod. We need you to withdraw the dispute with the bank, he said, and we need you to issue a statement to the family apologizing for the misunderstanding. You need to tell everyone that you overreacted and that we had a verbal agreement. I felt a cold laugh building in my chest, but I suppressed it. So, I said, my voice flat, you want me to commit perjury? You want me to tell a federally insured financial institution that I authorized a transaction I did not make, just so you can avoid a felony charge, and you want me to apologize for being robbed. My mother chimed in then, her voice dripping with that sickly sweet poison she used so well. Oh, Ariana, she said, tilting her head, you have been so stressed lately. We are all worried about you. You are working these long shifts. You are living alone. It is natural that you might get confused. We just want to help you save face. You are showing signs of paranoia. Honey, we do not want you to ruin your career by making a scene. There it was, the gaslighting, the attempt to rewrite reality so that their theft became my mental breakdown. I reached for the black folder I had brought. I placed it in the center of the table. Pushing aside the centerpiece of fake flowers, I opened it. I am not confused. Mother, I said, and I am not paranoid. I laid out the documents one by one, like tarot cards, predicting their destruction. Here is the confirmation from the bank regarding the fraud investigation. I said, here is the IP address log showing the login from Caleb's device. Here is the email rule you set up to forward my financial alerts to your secret account. And here is the itemized list of the $9,540 you stole. Caleb slammed his hand on the table. Stop it, he yelled. You are just trying to humiliate us. You are jealous because... I did not let him finish. I did not raise my voice. I cut through his noise with a question that was sharper than a scalpel. Who requested the replacement credit card be sent to the private mailbox at Pack and Ship in West Ellsbury? The room went deadly silent. My mother froze. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth. My father blinked, looking from me to her. Caleb's mouth snapped shut. They did not know that I knew about the box. I looked at Tessa. She was trembling. Tessa, I said softly, who told you about the box? Tessa looked at Daphne. Then she looked at me. And then, the dam broke. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup. Mom told me not to ask. She sobbed, her voice high and thin. She said it was grown-up business. She said she needed a safe place to handle the paperwork so Dad would not worry about the bills. My father slowly turned his head to look at his wife. Daphne? He asked. His voice was barely a whisper. You have a private mailbox? My mother's face twisted. She stood up, knocking her chair back. I did it for this family, she shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Caleb. He needed help. He is your son. Gordon. He was drowning in debt, and you were too busy playing the good guy to do anything about it. I had to fix it. It was not my fault, Caleb yelled, jumping up. It is the economy. It is the pressure. You guys put so much pressure on me to be successful. They were eating each other alive. The facade of the happy family had dissolved, leaving only a group of desperate people pointing fingers. My father sat there, silent, and in his silence, I saw the truth. He had known, maybe not about the specifics, maybe not about the mailbox, but he had known they were living beyond their means. He had let her handle it because he was too cowardly to ask where the money came from. His silence was his confession. Then, he moved. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He placed it on the table. His hands were shaking. Fine, he said. His voice was hollow. You want the money? Here. He slid the envelope toward me. It is a cashier's check, he said, for the full amount, $9,540. We got it this morning. Take it and leave us alone. I looked at the envelope. It was their Hail Mary. They thought that if they just threw money at the problem, I would go away. They thought my dignity had a price tag. I picked up the check. I pulled it out. I read the amount. $9,540. Then I read the line underneath. The remitter line. My heart stopped, and then it turned into a block of ice. It did not say Gordon and Daphne Chapman. It said the Chapman Family Trust. I stared at the paper. They had not used their own money. They didn't have any. They had gone to Aunt Marin, the trustee, and likely forged a request for an emergency withdrawal, probably claiming I was in rehab or had a medical crisis, to get the cash to pay me off. They were stealing from my grandmother's legacy to cover up the theft of my savings. They were using a crime to fix a crime. I placed the check back on the table. I did not put it in my purse. I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had saved to my favorites list just for this moment. I put it on speakerphone and set it down next to the check. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" came the voice of Aunt Marin. "Aunt Marin, it is Ariana," I said. "I am sitting at the dinner table with my parents." "Ariana? What is going on?" "I am looking at a cashier's check." "Marin," I said, looking directly at my mother, "it is made out to me for $9,540. The remitter is the family trust." The color drained from my mother's face so fast she looked like a corpse. My father made a sound like a dying animal. "I just wanted to let you know." I continued, my voice steady as steel. "I am not cashing this check, but you need to freeze the accounts immediately. They are using the trust to launder money to cover up fraud." There was a moment of silence on the line, a silence so heavy it felt like the ceiling was collapsing. "Thank you." "Ariana," Marin said. Her voice was cold fury. "I am locking the accounts now, and I'm calling the police." I hung up the phone. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb crater. Caleb was staring at the floor. Tessa was weeping silently. My parents looked at me with a mixture of hatred and terror that I would never forget. I stood up. I picked up my folder. I left the check on the table. It was just a piece of paper now. Trash. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not need to. I looked at them one last time. "If you wanted a daughter," I said, "you should have learned how to treat me like a human being." I headed for the door. "But if you just wanted a wallet," I added, not looking back. Then tonight, I finally closed it. I walked out of the house, into the cool night air. And I never looked back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on how I handled my family. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell so we can share this journey with even more people.